Good afternoon, and welcome to the Charleston Low Country Rose Society meeting. My name is Kathy Woolsey, and I'm the president, and I'll be doing a program to you today on growing roses naturally. First, if you're on Facebook, please hit the like button so I'll know you're there. You can also make comments, and I can see what your comments are, and maybe I can answer them. Today's program on growing roses naturally, we want to start with the basics, and that's site selection and soils and soil amendments. It's real important that you pick a site that gets as much sun exposure as possible. Also, good air ventilation. This might be hard to do if you live downtown in a walled garden, but try to get some morning sun if possible, and if all you've got an afternoon sun, that'll be fine, because that's all my roses get is the late afternoon sun. The more sun you have and more air circulation have, the less chance you have for diseases that can affect roses. Now, the soil is important. A lot of people just tend to ignore it. They think what they got is pretty good, but it never hurts to amend your soils. Remember, here in the low country, people have been farming for 300 or 400 years, and the soils are very depleted. So it's important to add nutrients and compost before you begin. I know you'll read a lot that says things that says don't fertilize your plants when you first plant them. Well, I have always added fertilizer and compost when I plant almost any plant. And that notion that you shouldn't add fertilizer has to do with way back when fertilizer was very fast action and could burn your plants. But today's fertilizers are coated. It's a different type of nitrogen, and it's less chance of burning. And organics, there's never a chance of any burning with organics, and you can apply organic fertilizer almost any time of the year, and especially when you plant. So if you're getting in roses, if you get in mail order bare root or roses, please soak them in water for a couple of days before you plant them, and cut off any damaged roots or cut them back. Also look for damaged stems. So pick your site out and amend your soil. And people always ask me what kind of compost I should use. Well, free is always good, but you should use a variety of compost. Rose Growers will tell you that mushroom compost, the roses really love it. And you probably think, what is mushroom compost? Well, it's mainly horse manure that's been pasteurized and amended and used to grow mushrooms on. And they grow about 2 crops of mushrooms. They add gypsum to the soil. They add lime and adjust a pH. It's usually got alfalfa hay in it. And alfalfa is really good for roses too. And other things in there. And then after they grow 2 crops of mushroom, they steam pasteurize it again and ship it here, and we use it in our gardens. Most of the mushroom compost, the good quality stuff, comes out of Pennsylvania around Kennett Square. That's like the mushroom capital of the world. Also, cow manure is very good. I really like black cow manure. It comes out of Florida. People don't think of Florida as being a cattle state, but they do have a lot of cows down there. They also make a good quality mushroom compost and a good quality topsoil. Be aware that some big box stores and places that sell things cheap will add cheap fillers to your manure and your mushroom compost. If you see a lot of pine bark or sand, nothing wrong with that, but you don't need to have that in your bag of cow manure or mushroom compost. And sand is just adding weight to that bag. Other things, you can get stuff out of your own compost bin, and whatever you have is available is great. Back in old textbooks, they would say get leaf mold. Leaf mold is just rotted leaves and branches on the ground of the forest floor. But any kind of compost is going to be great. Compost is like duct tape. It fixes a lot of problems. If your soil doesn't drain well, it's holding water, compost will fix that. If your soil drains too fast, compost will fix that. If your soil is compacted, compost will fix that. So adding compost really helps your rose garden out. If you can elevate your rose garden and put it in a raised bed, the roses will really love that. And roses do very well in pots, but you need a very large pot, usually a 5 to 6 gallon pot will be fine for most roses. And you need to select varieties that are smaller growing. You don't want to put a climbing rose in a pot, but all roses do very well in pots. Now we've talked a little bit about amending the soil and getting good drainage. You need to add some fertilizer to that. I like rose tone. It's a good one. There's all sorts of good rose fertilizers out there. Be aware that here in the Low Country, especially in the West Ashley area, James Island, Johns Island, West Ashley, all the way out to Ravenel and Hollywood, these areas many years ago were phosphate mines all over the place. And the phosphate that they mined was very shallow and close to the surface. And so this phosphate got into our waterways and into our soils, and most of the soils in this area are very high in phosphate. And a lot of national companies that sell rose fertilizer will have a high middle number. Well, we don't need that around here. You want to go with a low middle number on that phosphorus because you really don't need it. And if you do a soil test, you'll see that these areas have high phosphorus. And they have plenty of potassium too. The main thing most of our soils need around here is nitrogen. Now, if you live on one of the barrier islands, Kiowa, Seabrook, Folly, Sullivan's Island, you have very sandy soils. You don't have as much phosphorus or potassium in there, and you might need a more balanced fertilizer for that, for those areas. And by the way, some of the best roses I've ever seen were on the barrier islands. I really believe that roses benefit by that salty air. I see less fungus problems on the sea islands and the barrier islands because of the salty air and the good breeze that they get. So a great place to grow roses, but you've got to add a lot of compost because sand won't hold any nutrients. So you've got to bring in some topsoil, you've got to bring in some mushroom compost and add a lot of organic matter, and you've got to constantly, every year, add more organic matter. I have pretty good soil, but I like to amend my soil, usually January, February, March. I'll rake back the mulch, and I will add a layer of mushroom compost, a couple of inches deep. I don't work it in. I let the earthworms do their job, and you won't believe the new growth if you do that in the spring. When those new canes come up, will be really thick, long. The foliage will be deep green color. So adding or mending the top of the soil, just top dressing with some mushroom compost, will be great for those roses if you've already planted them. What I really like about any of the Espoma products is because they have microorganisms in them, beneficial microorganisms called mycorrhiza. And each bag of Espoma products is formulated with the mycorrhiza and the beneficial organisms that your plants need. It also, rose tone has extra calcium in it, some gypsum in it, so I think that's really important to have that for strong rose stems. You usually about a cup per plant when you put it in there. I also like to use milorganite to add a little slow release organic nitrogen. Like I said, nitrogen is going to be the big problem around here, and just throwing milorganite around during the growing season about once a month. I like to put it in my spreader, do the whole yard with milorganite about once a month. The yard, the trees, everybody gets fed because nitrogen depletes very fast around here. Another fertilizer you could use on your roses is Epsom salt. Epsom salt is a natural product, and it's been used for centuries for a variety of different things. You can soak your feet in it. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium can be a problem, a deficiency. I see it a lot in palm trees and citrus trees. Sulfur is a minor nutrient too. And what I like to do is wait till about May or June, and you can buy this at a garden center or you can buy it at a drugstore. And I like to sprinkle this out lightly during the growing season. It dissolves very fast in water, so when you put it out, if you get heavy rain, it can wash away. So I like to have the plant up and growing really well before I put the magnesium sulfate down. And if you've got some sago palms or palm trees, throw a couple handfuls around that too and water it in lightly. And that's a good fertilizer you can add to your rose garden too. Let's talk about controlling pests. I think the biggest problem I see is thrips. And thrips are so tiny, you barely see them. But in the summertime, if you take a rose and flower when it's open and you blow on it lightly and look down, you'll see the thrips coming up through the middle, and they cause the blooms to be deformed. So you want to control the thrips. And fortunately, there's a great organic spray that you can use on thrips. I like to do it late in the evening, but it's called spinosad. It's made from a bacteria. It doesn't last long in the environment. You might have to spray it once a week, but it kills small insects and caterpillars really fast. And it's pretty safe for just about everything. Won't hurt you. They actually have a pill for your pets for fleas that contains spinosad. So anyway, that's a great one. Another problem is spider mites and some fungus. And there's actually a spray that takes care of both of those. It's called Triple Action Spray. It has neem oil and pyrethium in it. The neem oil will kill some insects and take care of some fungus too. The pyrethium is made from a daisy. It's a very quick kill, breaks down very fast. Again, I like to spray these late in the evening after the honeybees go to bed. Of course, I think selecting good roses is very important. When you join the American Rose Society, they send you this book. It's the handbook for selecting roses. And it is chock full of information, but they rate all the roses. 10 being a fantastic rose and 1 being a rose you should avoid. But you can, when you're out shopping or looking online for roses, you can check in this book and look at the rating of this type of the rose you're interested in. And I would recommend you don't get anything under 7. I go for 8, 9, 10 ratings on there. There's a lot of good roses out there. That tells you that's a very good rose and will probably do well. I grow a lot of roses, but I grow very few hybrid teas. Hybrid teas are, at least most varieties, are very susceptible to black spot and other fungus diseases. I like the old garden roses. They do very well. Here's one of my favorite ones here. This one is a pink one called Claire Matine, which I believe is Claire Matine is a shrub rose. I think it was hybridized in the 1960s. Somebody gave me a cutting many years ago. I've had a plant for many years. Here's a darling little rose here called Bermuda Kathleen. It is one of the Bermuda roses, and they all do very well around here, and this is one of my favorite ones here. Here's another rose. This is a climber from China. This one is called Fortuniana, named for the famous botanist Robert Fortune. This rose is a one-time bloomer like Lady Banks rose. I have it sprawling all over a wooden fence, and there are canes on that rose that are like 15 to 20 feet long. It blooms right now, mid-March. Fortuniana is important because it's a great rootstock. You can find companies online that will graft roses onto Fortuniana. And anything you graft on Fortuniana is going to grow really well. But it's a very disease-resistant plant. I just love it, even though it just blooms once. It has very small, very few thorns. The foliage looks exactly like Lady Banks, except for Lady Bank doesn't have any thorns. This is a great little rose here. This is Champneys Pink Cluster. This was the first rose hybridized in America. It was a cross between two Chinese roses, the Musk rose and Old Blush probably. Very fragrant. What made this rose really important was that it bloomed constantly. Mine bloom almost 9 to 10 months out of the year. A very fragrant rose, blooms constantly, fairly disease resistant. If you're out south of town, take 17 South, and before you get to Hollywood, you'll see Champneys Blueberry Farm. That's the site of John Champney's home. And go eat some of their blueberries too. But that's where the first rose that was hybridized in America came from, right there. So that really put Charleston on a map. This rose was given to John Champney's friend, Phillippe Noisette. He sent it to his brother in France, and they went crazy over it over there. That's why a lot of these Noisette classes of roses have French names on them. But they do incredibly well in our warm climate. Most of them are climbers or very vigorous bushes, but they do very well. Let's see, what else have I got here? I have a lot of found roses that I don't even know their names. This one, about 30 years ago, I was helping a friend do a wedding. We went to this little lady's house, and we picked these roses for the bouquets in the wedding. My friend called it, I think she either called it maid of honor or bridesmaid. Now, I've looked these names up. I don't think this is those roses. I don't know what it is. It's an old tea rose or maybe a hybrid tea rose. It has been in my garden for 30 years. Very little care taken to it. Blooms a lot in the spring and the fall, not too much in the summer or the winter. It's just, this is the first bloom this year, but it's a huge bloom. It really is. Let's see what I got here. This is another rose. I'm not really sure what the name of it is. A friend of mine gave it to me, some cuttings about 20 years ago. I've got 2 of them. She called it Pink Pet. It's not Pink Pet. I think it's the pink form of Irene Watts. It's a little Polyanthas rose, huge bush. My bush maybe is 6 foot by 6 foot. Blooms constantly. I love it. Very fragrant. I love it. It's just a great rose, and I don't really know the name of it. That's okay. It's a good rose. Let's see what else I've got here. Here is a rose. It's a recent purchase. I got this at Roses Unlimited in Lawrence, South Carolina. It's called Celebration Sunset. It's a tea rose. It opens up like this. It's very disease resistant. I really like it. It's one of my few tea roses. And over here, I believe this one is called Armada. It's a modern shrub rose, very big. Good bloomer, very disease resistant. I love it. Well, that's about all I have for you here. I hope you learned something. We have, the Rose Society has a Facebook page, and now I've just created a Facebook group. The difference between a group and a Facebook page is the page, I and another woman, we moderate that. You can't post things on there. We can. The group is for everybody who joins the group, and that allows you to have a discussion online about your roses. You can post pictures, you can ask questions, you If you found a rose and you don't know the name of it, or you've lost a name, you can put it out there to the group and everybody can answer you. You can invite friends to the group and join the group. So I recommend that you join, it's Charleston Rose Society group on Facebook, and you'll find a link. So please, let's stay together while we're being quarantined and communicate with each other and share our love of roses. And maybe we'll all get through this together, and at least we'll still have some pretty roses, won't we? Thank you for joining me today, and please post your questions and make comments. Thank you. Goodbye.